After 12 weeks, the Mangano corruption trial finally over, and it has ended in a mistrial. Our Dominic Carter live outside the courthouse with reaction and what happens next. Then, President Trump visits with family members from the tragic school shooting in Texas as the nation continues to debate gun control and school safety. We will take a look at some shocking numbers and whether or not any progress has and can be made. Then, Roseanne Barr tweeted it, but now Trump is being blamed for it. We're going to show you why the president is taking flack and while many say he may deserve it. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French, and thank you very much for joining us this Thursday night. Now, the corruption trial of former Nassau County exec Ed Mangano and his wife Linda has finally mercifully ended, at least for now. After 10 weeks of testimony and 2 weeks of jury deliberations, the judge has declared a mistrial. Our Dominic Carter has been there from the very beginning, and he joins us live outside the courthouse in Central Islip with more. Dom?
And good evening to you, Richard. The Mangano trial may be over, but this appears to be far from done. Federal Judge Joan Azraq declared a mistrial after the jury foreman sent a note stating, "I can no longer carry out my duties as a juror. I wish to be excused." Judge Azraq then set a June 28th status conference to schedule a new trial. Wait, Mr. Mangano, this is the first time I've seen you cry. What's
very emotional
happening
time.
here?
It's just an emotional time. I'm sorry, but I thank the jurors for this.
I haven't seen you broken down in 12 weeks, and now
It's a lot of emotion.
What do you think about the foreperson who said he wanted an acquittal?
Well, you know, those are words that have a lot of meaning.
I am so emotional. I don't know. I just feel very appreciative. This has been so hard on Ed, obviously, also on my children. It's been really difficult. But, you know, as I said before, I mean, you know, every day that we came to court, I have such a beautiful support system, and I'm so grateful and so blessed to have them.
The 7 women and 5 men of the jury deliberated for 9 days, even with an alternate, but failed to come to a verdict, sending several notes that they could not agree. The Manganos, who sat for 12 weeks together at the defendant's table, hugged after Azraq declared a mistrial. The trial began March 12th and included 60 witnesses and more than 1,100 pieces of evidence. Prosecutors sought to make their case that Mangano used his public position to steer restaurant owner Harindra Singh 2 county contracts and more than $20 million in business loans backed by the town of Oyster Bay. Prosecutors say Mangano received free meals, free vacations, and a no-show job for Linda Mangano that paid a total of $450,000 over 4 years.
They put a good case, but to me personally, the fact that they're trying to prove that someone said false statements like Linda, and they're not going to give the exact statements or a transcript or a copy or even the notes, to me, you know, I don't feel comfortable saying someone was guilty of federal charges for false statements if they're not going to tell me what those false statements are.
So, Richard, the question becomes tonight, are the feds actually going to come back against the Manganos? We can use history as an example. In one case, New Jersey Senator Robert Menendez, he went through his corruption trial. Keep in mind, the feds said they were going to retry him. I know you remember this well, Richard, having paid close attention to the trial. But then the judge gutted the charges in terms of the evidence, and then the feds said they were not going to retry him. So the date has been set for June 28th, a pre-conference trial. We will see what the feds want to do. Reporting live from the federal courthouse in Central Islip, I'm Dominic Carter. Richard, let's go back to you in the studio.
Dom, help me out. Where did this fall apart for the prosecution? Because in the beginning, they showed systemic, or at least presented systemic abuse that seemingly was going on all across the island. Anybody who had a daughter getting married or wanted to have an event, everybody went to sing and they had their hand out, or so it seemed. How did we get from there to today, where it seemed that they were closer to an acquittal than a conviction?
You are correct in your assessment. Some days, Richard, it was embarrassing to sit in this courtroom and hear the allegations of the free rides, the free meals, commissioners, if you will, on the take, accepting free items from Nassau County. But at the end of the day, Richard, this case is very similar to Menendez. I know you remember the lead argument in the Menendez case, and that was, that's me, amigo, that's my friend, we're longtime friends. That's exactly, and Mr. Mangano said that himself here tonight. So one, you had another star prosecution witness, Arinder Singh, on the stand for many, many days, I believe a week and a half. Defense attorneys did a solid job in punching holes in his testimony. So that's one. Two, Richard, it comes down really at the end of the day, same argument, quid pro quo. In this case, the $20 million loan. So on the surface, it appears outrageous that the town of Oyster Bay is guaranteeing a personal loan for a businessman, a private entity, and it's backed by a government entity. That is outrageous. But here's the problem. You've got to prove who did that. So you had Mangano in the meeting basically saying, I believe the Fed said, let's get this done, but that's it. Now, Mr. Venditto, who's cleared of all charges, and the Manganos, they were at the meeting, but their defense has been they had lawyers there representing the town as well, and other officials that signed off on this. So to answer your question specifically, the stuff about the commissioners and so on, at the end of the day, that one may say that was, not major elements. It was the $20 million loan, but you can't prove who was the one that really signed off on that, Richard.
Dom, this is why I don't go to Vegas. I lose all the bets here. I would have bet good money, Mangano, and maybe not just Ed, but wife and the other defendant would have been looking at a guilty or a conviction, at least on some of these counts. But the only thing I can find, and you're the poor guy who's had to cover about half a dozen of these corruption trials across the region, Menendez and Mangano had one thing in common, which is they were local boys that went before a jury pool. And there seemed to be that they got the benefit of the doubt when a Silver or a Skelos or a Prococo didn't. Maybe I'm reading too much, but when I heard your coverage post-verdict with a lot of not only the jury forum, but other people that were coming out, they were willing, unless proven otherwise, to give Ed the benefit of the doubt here, or so it seemed.
You hit the nail on the head there, Richard. That's exactly the case. I call it basically personality politics. That is, and I saw this in Menendez, if the jury likes you, the prosecution has got a major problem. That's it at the end of the day. If the jury likes your personality and the evidence is, then it makes the burden of proof much harder. So in this case, you have Mangano, who walks in here with his wife every day, and the foreman of the jury, a New York City police officer. You heard him say live on our air today that he didn't buy anything, for the most part, of what Singh had to say. And so it sounds like, listening to the foreman, that he had the foreman in his corner, that is Mangano, no matter what. And again, that foreman was willing to quit the jury before he was willing to convict. So I really feel, Richard, having done a number of these, so for example, and Sheldon Silver, because this is not a good climate for elected officials in terms of corruption trials. And Sheldon Silver, the jury didn't like him. Dean Skelos, the jury wasn't sympathetic to him. And Menendez, in this case, the jury, and if you listen to what the man said, initially, the foreman, there were more votes to acquit than to convict. There were more votes to acquit than to convict. So at the end of the day, Richard, to answer your question, it seems like Richard, like the jury liked the county executive, and at the end of the day, a mistrial.
Yep, and we're going to see what the prosecution is going to do if they move forward. But Dom, as always with these things, great job. And for folks who are watching live on Files when the verdict came down, they went right to my man Dom here, as they seemingly do every time when these trials end. All right, let's bring in our panel right now. Charlie King, New York co-chairman, the Mercury Public Affairs outfit. He's also, or was, a senior campaign advisor to Andrew Cuomo's re-election campaign. Jerica Richardson, former spokesperson for Preet Bharara and Mayor Bill de Blasio. And Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. It seems like I ask this question every time one of these things ends, with limited exceptions. I still don't know what corruption is anymore. And everybody says quid pro quo. Yeah, right. Clearly a position in power, exercised it and benefited from his office with personal enrichment. And now it was a greater likelihood he was going to get acquitted than convicted of anything. What am I missing here, Charlie?
I'm as astounded as you. I mean, I more votes to acquit than convict here. I mean, I don't wish ill on anybody, but I do think that if people do wrong, particularly if they're in public service, they have to pay for what they're doing. I mean, I'm speechless here.
Maybe it is a culture of personality, Jerica. Maybe we complicate things too much. But after a spate of convictions, and then yes, there was, after the decision with McDonnell and the Supreme Court, redefining. Fine, they changed the charge to the jury here and the instructions they got before they went about. But I don't get this one. I don't get a few of them. Even Senator Menendez. I'm surprised about that one. It really seems the 12 people, when they go in that room, did they like them or didn't they? And I think sometimes we overthink these things.
Yeah, it's anyone's guess. But I will tell you that overall in the city and in the state, there's been a lot of focus on public corruption, and accountability is important. So we got to see what the prosecutors decide to do.
Do you get the sense, though, that in Albany or Trenton or any state capital, they look at what happened today on the island and in other cases and they say, I'm not going to change what I'm doing here. The vast majority are good. Let's get that out of the way. It's true, okay? But for the ones that would think about doing what we've seen happen here, and it was apparently systemic on the island, it wasn't just the county executive, why should they think any different after what we just heard the jury foreman say?
I don't know. That's anyone's guess. Power can corrupt at times, but sometimes folks are emboldened by seeing things like that.
I think it's a very interesting question that you asked, because I think that the people who toe the line and try to do the right thing, they're more spooked by everything. They're always wondering if they're doing things wrong, even when they're doing things right.
Right.
So they're more afraid to even have a cup of coffee because they think it's wrong all along. So the heightened fear of corruption for those who are doing the right thing, they're even more afraid to do the wrong thing. I think those who are doing the wrong thing feel more emboldened. So it's a really weird, perverse situation.
Andrew, you've been with me at these tables for all these. Yeah. Is there a rinse and repeat kind of feel to this, or are you getting any kind of pattern? Because I'm not. I'm trying. I don't understand what's happening.
I mean, it's hard to know. There is a rinse and repeat feel to the whole thing, and yes, it is sort of a crapshoot as to whether somebody's going to be convicted or not. But obviously what he did was unethical and was wrong to do. The fact that he's not going to go to prison, at least not yet, unless he's convicted on a retrial, says something. I mean, but even Robert Menendez is facing a penalty from New Jersey voters, as we've seen in some poll numbers. So Mangano's, I think, lucky that he's not still in office. Otherwise, I think voters would hold this against him. Mm-hmm. And I would still, if I was in Albany or in Trenton, I would read this as a cautionary tale, and at the very least, I would try to be more careful about it.
Just a little. All right, coming up next, the gun debate flares up again. That as President Trump visits family members of the latest school shooting victims. And a young boy asked the White House press secretary what they're doing to stop the violence, and it elicited an emotional response. We'll have all that straight ahead.